Nothing contained in this videocast is intended to encourage the use of illegal substances. This videocast represents only the opinions of the host and their guests and should not be taken as medical or legal advice. In no way does listening, reading, corresponding, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient or legal relationship. The content here is intended to share thoughts and opinions and foster constructive discussion. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions concerning cannabis. The views expressed by hosts and guests on this videocast are not necessarily the views of Global Cannabis Times or any other company with which the hosts and guests are associated.
Hello, and welcome to an episode of Going Global, a Global Cannabis Times podcast hosted by myself, Simone Sandoval of Global Go, and Andreou of Global Go Cyprus. Now, on today's episode, we will be discussing Malta and its advancements toward recreational cannabis legalization. Now, as you may have heard, last December, Malta made international news when it became the first EU country to agree to formally legalize the production and use of recreational cannabis. Now, this groundbreaking first step allows people to carry up to 7 grams of cannabis, grow up to 4 plants, and possess up to 50 grams of dried cannabis at home. And the new law ends criminalization of people for smoking marijuana and reduces criminal trafficking of the substance. While similar forms of decriminalization exist in other EU countries, such as the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain, in those nations, possession of a small amount of cannabis can still be a civil offense, and coffee shops and cannabis social clubs are quote unquote tolerated or only de facto allowed by court decisions. Now, we are honored to sit down with psychotherapist Mariella Dimech, the newly appointed executive chairperson of Malta's new cannabis authority, the Authority on the Responsible Use of Cannabis. Now, as I understand it, this new body acts as a regulator for nonprofit associations, which are now allowed to cultivate and distribute cannabis to approved members. So welcome, Mariella. We are thrilled to have you here today to get to know a little bit about you and what's going on in Malta. So let's just kick it off. I understand that your background is in drug rehabilitation services. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in this role of executive chairperson for the Authority on the Responsible Use of Cannabis?
Well, I never intended to take this position. I was called and I was asked by the Prime Minister to take on this position, probably because of my past experience working in the addiction field and drug use. I was the first female staff member in Malta many years ago, over 2 decades ago, who started rehabilitation in Malta. So I spent nearly 20 years building up the whole idea with excellent teams, the whole idea of rehabilitation, both residential and non-residential. I'm very aware what the problems about substance use create, all types of substances, but I'm also very aware that the highest incidence of substance use in Malta and around the world is alcohol and cannabis. Therefore, it's very important that we're aware that although there have always been very strict regulations surrounding any form of substance use and abuse, cannabis, cocaine, heroin, all types of substances, it doesn't work, because if it does work, it wouldn't be one of the most used substances in the world. So I believe very much in harm reduction. I believe very much in risk reduction. And I believe that although we don't have to promote the use of cannabis or of any other substance, however, we need to accept that cannabis is a substance that is used. It is one of the highest used substances in Malta and around the world. From research, and as much as research and my own personal experience, I'm very aware that the majority of these people are not criminals, but everyday people who live a very normal life. And therefore, I don't believe, neither does this law believe that they should be treated, their human rights should be treated as criminals. I think it is more effective, and this is why I decided to take on this role, that if we do a good job, we are going to be able to create a difference. You can have a 19-year-old who has decided to take cannabis, and a 19-year-old can either go to a dealer, black market or illegal market, who will be selling all types of drugs, Cannabis that they have no idea what type of cannabis, what's in the cannabis, chemicals, pesticides, level of THC, what effect is going to have. They're going to be sold cannabis from a dealer who doesn't care much about them, but cares about how much money they're going to make. Versus today, with our regulatory system that we are creating, a 19-year-old who decides they want to have cannabis can be a member, can go to a place that only provides cannabis, will know it's THC, will know the quality is good and safe, and will be served by people who are trained not only to give information regarding the substance they are choosing to take, but also trained to recognize red flags, trained to recognize if someone is not okay. And that is the definition of harm reduction. So I put this all in one box very quickly.
No, that's very interesting. It sounds like you have, a really strategic approach and an interesting background to how you're going to approach legalizing it for the recreational market in Malta. And kind of what you said there is there's an educational element to it as well. You have to educate the public, educate the consumers on the choices that they'll have.
Our language needs to change, because if you educate with this attitude of stigmatization, with this attitude that you are speaking with people who are dropouts, good for nothing, they want to do nothing. If you are going to address and educate with this attitude, then people are not going to be open. People want to know what they're taking. They want to understand. They're interested. They're genuinely interested. And that is the way we want to educate, with respect, integrity, believing that people are capable of understanding and they want to understand. So there is a difference also in our attitude, in the way we are going to be approaching even a simple thing like education.
Indeed. Thank you, Mariella. It's a pleasure to see you. Of course, we've had a few conversations before, and I'm very pleased to be here on this podcast with you and listen to your remarks and comments. And congratulations to Malta for being such pioneers and carrying that cannabis torch. And obviously, they've selected a great lady for the job. So we're all looking to you now. And wow, what a position to lead the way. So I would like for you to tell us, if you can, about the recently passed Malta legislation legalizing adult use cannabis and why it's such an important step for the EU as a whole. As I said, we're looking to Malta now because you've all been very wise about enhancing your profile in the cannabis sector. So we are actively looking to Malta now to lead the way and show us how it can be done.
Well, after meeting persons like you, Andrea, and so many other persons who are so involved in getting the people who can make the final decisions and understanding that this approach can work, that this is the right approach, this is the approach that is going to be able to allow people to be safer, to be healthier, to be respected, to be able to talk about what they're doing, to feel that they can do things and be, it's such a change of a mentality. And I've spoken to so many international people from Europe, and I feel a massive sense of responsibility, not just on a national level. It is very, very important. I mean, Malta is a very small island and a limited number of population, a very small population. However, we want to be a pilot study. We want to share our data. I do feel a great sense of responsibility, not only towards Malta, but towards Europe. We need to make this work, and we need to prove it, not just by talking about it, but even scientifically. So it's very important that we are always available. It's very important that we collect data, and it's very important that this data is going to be made available so that when European countries need to see, okay, if we do change the system, if we do change our approach, what is the outcome? So, I mean, anybody who conducts research, anybody who does this knows that the first thing you need to do is a pilot study on a small scale. We're the small scale. We've gone ahead, we've passed the law, and now we are going to share our data, and we're going to be learning, we're going to be making mistakes, you know, but I think it's a great sense of responsibility we feel, not just on a national level, but even on an international one.
Yes, indeed. That's why I said earlier that you're carrying the torch now and you're leading the way, and we are all watching. We are all watching very carefully and following, because it is about EU. It's not, well, EU and global. It's not just about Malta. Simply Malta seems to have some good people in place that understand what this is all about.
Yes, and I think it was a risky move. I think it was based very much on believing in the risk and harm reduction approach. I think it was very much an acknowledgement, you know. I conducted a research on how effective rehabilitation is, and I interviewed 80 persons entering treatment. And a year later, I traced them. Not difficult to trace people in Malta. We can find most people. Massive. There was a larger number of people incarcerated in prison than people who are in the program, in the rehabilitation programs. That in itself is a statement. People do not change when they are punished. People change with knowledge, with respect, with integrity, with boundaries. It is very important that we still have boundaries. It is very important that we don't create a free-for-all, and that is not our intention. We are a regulatory board. The authority is a regulatory board, but I am establishing, it's very important that we establish a very supportive role too. And that is what we are trying to do, not only with people who are members of the organizations, but also with the rest of the community. Society as a whole needs to understand what this law means, and they need to not just be judgmental and apprehensive, but once they understand, they will feel safer.
So does the law then, Mariella, differentiate between addicts then, so-called? Because I'm understanding that you have two categories. So you have already the law says, as I understand it, you're allowed 4 plants in your house, 50 grams, etc., etc. And then you have another, you have other provisions in the legislation that provide for rehabilitation.
Yes. No, the law, no, basically what happens is this. The law is allowing two things. One is that people can grow their own plants at home, up to 4 plants. And that is, they can go ahead and do it. The second is that if you would like to become a member of a non-profit organization, then you're a member of a non-profit organization, you go to the organization you're a member of, and they will dispense cannabis. Are
those organizations open right now?
No, we're in the process. I just did a whole forum where I informed them of the criteria that are that's necessary for them to be able to apply for the license. And the criteria is it's quite detailed, but we will be helping them. There's criteria for cultivation, criteria for storage, criteria for dispensing, and criteria also for delivering from one point to the other. For example, the authority will be training all the staff in all the different sections. We will be getting people who are very experienced to train our trainers. And every year we will be training them according to what their responsibilities are. So there has to be a lot of preparation.
Understood.
And there
where will you find those trainers?
Pardon?
Sorry, Mariella, where will you find the trainers?
The trainers I'm going to find from Europe, although in Europe it's not allowed, but there are people who are very, very experienced, very professional. They're researchers, they're people who have studied, they're people who have been very supportive to this approach. And I've traveled to Barcelona, I've traveled to the UK. I had a guest, British person from Transform, Steve Rolls, as my guest speaker for the first forum. He's just written a book about policy on cannabis, legalization. So I want to work with international colleagues, and I want to create a sense of community, not just in Malta, but in the whole of Europe.
We may be diversifying a little bit, but I am curious to know about Project 21 in the UK, and I think it's happening in Australia as well. So when you say pilot studies and schemes, I think some of those are already taking place. Of course, we all know that UK is no longer EU, but of course they are also leading the way in terms of non-food and the other side of the cannabis coin. Yeah. So are you looking at those? Are you joining them? Are you developing with them? Or are you doing
we're not joining them.
own...
However, no, we're not joining them.
Studies,
however,
the test studies, yeah.
Yeah. However, I am sharing data with a group of international researchers with the EMCDDA, with representatives from Switzerland, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Germany, and ourselves. We're sharing data, we're sharing information. Switzerland is conducting experiments too, and Netherlands also are conducting experiments. So there's a lot of work being done in the background. It's very unfortunate that sometimes the people who have to make decisions, it's quicker to say no and to keep control, because that doesn't create fear. When people go into an area what they don't really know, the solution to that is getting to know. The solution to that is learning and looking at the vast amount of research that's being conducted all around the world, you know, to be able to get a system where you can pass this law and slowly begin to understand that this is an approach that is the safest way.
The no, some people would argue, comes from vested interests, but I'm not going to go into that right now, especially not publicly. So we'll carry on, Simone, if you like, to go with the next question, because that's a wholly controversial topic. But I did have a very interesting conversation with somebody today who said the no does come sometimes from those who have a vested interest and they don't want the status quo to be disrupted.
Yes, unfortunately, I agree.
You touched a little bit about basically what the parameters are going to be for licensing, you know, for cultivators, maybe storage transporters. Can you just explain maybe a little bit about, you know, the high level requirements? You know, are all applicants required to form as a collective? You know, is there going to be a local ownership rule, meaning do you need a Malta citizen on that application? You know, are you looking to cap those number of licenses?
Yes, so obviously we are eventually going to have to cap the licenses unless people want to grow cannabis in the fish farms, because we're just a little island. So literally there's a limitation. In each organization there can be 500 members. To own an organization and to become a member of an organization, for now, a person has to be a Maltese resident. The process of how this is going to work is slowly. So first we are going to get the non-profit organizations up and running, where they are only going to be dispensing. We're not going to be starting with social clubs. What we're going to do is we're going to get the system, the framework functioning well, because there are so many details. It is going to be so a license is going to be given to one license for cultivating, storage, and dispensation. One license, but they can be 3 different owners working together like a cooperative. The idea as such is very much like that. However, it's not going to be exactly the same. The fact that it is a non-profit organization also creates we have to have a very refined way of looking at the financials. There has to be a percentage that goes to the wages, which will be very good, because at the end of the day, there has to be, for this work and investment and everything, the wages will be allowed to be very good. There has to be money that is reinvested within the organizations, money that is given for the licenses, but there's also going to be a percentage that is going to be utilized to give back to the rest of society. So, for example, we're looking into with the residue of the cannabis plants. When you take off the flowers, you have the stalks and you have hemp. You can create hemp. And our idea is that all of us, all the organizations, will be able to provide enough amount to have enough hemp to build furniture for school children. And that is what we would like to export to schools that need furniture to.
Oh, that's marvelous.
So, you know, we're very much aiming to change the whole idea of what does it mean to actually grow cannabis and what does it mean to actually have a non-profit organization. So it's very much this kind. And I just had my first forum with all the people who are interested in having organizations. It went so well. It was a great opportunity. I wanted them all to meet and network. They are going to be in competition. However, they also need to understand that they have to have, on a certain level, work together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But what's in it for them then, Mariella? What's in it for the organizations?
What's in it for them is, well, there are going to be two types of organizations. You have the organizations where there are a group of people who know each other, who want to go ahead, do this, be safe, and do it legally. So those will be smaller organizations. People who know people. They want to get together, they want to do it, and they want it all legal, above ground, and those are not doing it. They have their own jobs. It's not something they're going in for big money. Then you have the larger organizations, which I know that their interest might be, listen, I want to make money. However, I made it very clear in the forum. I have some photos of their faces, not very happy. But I had to make it very clear. I had to make it very clear that this is not just coming from us. This is also coming from the fact that there are laws and rules, and there's a UN convention, and there's all this political agenda going on in the background that we have to respect and adhere to. So I explained to them that they are going to be able to have a good wage. They are going to eventually be able to open social clubs where they can, for example, sell paraphernalia, and they can sell other things that are separate from cannabis, where there is an allowance of profit making. So it's very fine, but it has to be very, very organized. Because if it's not, then they slip through the cracks. What I do not want to do is, I do not want to set up people to become dealers. I do not want to set them up to cheat. They have to have enough support to be comfortable and to understand that this is the concept. Either you work with it or else you can walk away.
Got it. And so is there going to be a requirement that you have to secure property in order to get, before you file the application at the time of application?
Well, one of the necessary aspects of applying for the license is that they have to show us where they're meaning to cultivate. They can rent or buy, the type of security they have, the knowledge they have. We're going to train them on knowledge, the amount of cannabis they're going to grow, so all these details. It's very important that they have the right security. It's very important that they know how many staff they're going to hire. All these details they need to have in place. When they have them, I'm calling it the operational plan. Not a business
And that's all
plan.
in the law. That's all in the law,
Yes,
Mariella.
it's in the law, but what we're doing as the authority is that in the authority now, we are creating the regulatory criteria. We are creating the framework. We are the ones who are creating the system on how this is going to work. For example, the storage, there has to be extremely very good hygiene, the way they're going to pack. For example, we've organized that the packing is going to be the same across the board. It's going to be hopefully environmental friendly. And also it's going to be cannot contain more than 7 grams of gross cannabis, so that if the police stop them, they know that it's 7 grams and they have a barcode to show that they are members and they're fine. They don't have more, they don't have too much. They're all within legal limits and they're members of an organization.
Is this scheme is it something that Malta has created, or is any other European Union country doing it the way you're doing it? Is this your strategy as Malta? Because obviously in Cyprus, we've had a hemp law since 2016. We've had a medical cannabis law since 2019. So all of the things that you're describing that need to be in place and the strict requirements, etc. This was already laid down in our legislation in Cyprus quite some time ago. Of course, the medical cannabis law is up now for amendment, another one, but the hemp law has been around since 2016 and unlimited number of licenses.
Well,
what is the
hemp was never used in Malta. Don't forget, it wasn't legal to grow cannabis.
So you didn't have a hemp law until now?
No. And in fact, the hemp idea that I have is something that I will follow through after the organizations are set and running. But this is certainly something I want to work on. But everything in phases. But hemp law, medical cannabis has been legal since 2015. However, again, medical cannabis needs to take a bit of a better understanding. I think that the doctors, who I believe that doctors are highly intelligent, very knowledgeable, but more so for medication, rather than the benefits of CBD, in some cases even THC, or the mixture of both. I think there needs to be, I mean, it's not just enough for a law to be passed. You need to educate, you need to inform.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is the only way people will believe in it. So I'm not responsible for the medical, I'm responsible for the recreational, but I'm very determined that it will be a bit different to the medical. I would like people to be educated so that they will not fear, they will not judge, and they will not close up their ears, and they will listen and understand and then make a decision on whether they agree to something or not.
It sounds like you guys are separating and keeping those markets kind of separate, which is, it's a different approach to, you know, what we did in California, kind of combining the two medical and adult use markets together. And I was just wondering, you know, will medical producers be allowed to supply the adult use market in Malta, or are those basically going to be kept separate?
They are going to be kept separate, because although we are going to be testing the quality, we're going to be testing the soil, we're going to be testing the water content, the metals, pesticides, chemicals, level of THC, etc. We're going to be doing all that. Obviously, medical cannabis has stricter level of testing and the level that has to be reached.
Got it.
Recreational does not. I believe that medical cannabis deserves to be separate to recreational. I am very aware that some people, in a way, self-medicate with recreational cannabis, but that is why I would like to give importance to training people who dispense cannabis to recognize red flags. It is very important that there are certain signs that they recognize. And I firmly believe, after spending over 2 decades of working with users of any substance, that the users will be more open to the people who are dispensing cannabis than to any professor from the best universities in the world. And I mean, they speak their language and they would listen to them, you know, and they would recognize red flags. And I believe medical cannabis, unfortunately, is underestimated. I think that if doctors really understand the benefits for certain, not all, for certain illnesses, I think that they deserve to be separate. Because the population who should be going for cannabis for the 2 different reasons needs to be respected too. They have to have their needs addressed.
Absolutely. So even my strategy here in Cyprus through the Cyprus Cannabis Association is exactly, except for, of course, the education, lobbying and connecting, which are the main purposes of the association. It's also, I'm choosing to separate those, at least clearly in my mind, for the purposes of adopting specific strategies for each, because the legislation, whilst it's interrelated to a very great degree, it is a separate piece of legislation completely that governs hemp, that governs, well, CBD is not even mentioned in the legislation at all. It's a very grey area still, as it is in most EU countries. And then we have medical cannabis, which is a wholly different ballgame as far as I am concerned. So what is different then, Mariella, in Malta? What are you doing differently in Malta that they've done already, for example, in Amsterdam? What is it that's changing? What is the regulatory framework?
We're totally different to Amsterdam. Although in Amsterdam now there are some coffee shops that are experimenting, and they're going under an experiment and conducting very, very detailed research. What they're doing is that before, all coffee shops were tolerated and were providing cannabis that was bought from the illegal market. So
in the
cannabis,
in
yes,
the centre, I
all the
understand,
coffee
because
shops.
outside of the city, I was under the impression it was not possible. It was just for tourist purposes, really, in the
Yes.
city, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's all the sad thing is this: there are many organizations, not just in Amsterdam. There's even in all over Europe, but unfortunately they are not regulated. How sad is that? So you have a system, you have people like me, like you, who want to regulate, who want to have it in an organized manner, who want to do it in the best way possible, but because of people who are, not agreeing to this or not risking or not trying, it's not regulated. So in Amsterdam, they have now finally got a few coffee shops where they are cultivating, and they are trying to see that if they cultivate and if they don't do it illegally, what is the outcome? But it's a slow process. It's a very good process. I'm not saying it's bad, because it's very well followed. But yes, I mean, basically.
But it's a different regulatory scheme to the one that you have in your mind for Malta. It's different completely. Yeah. So
because they already have the social clubs.
So you like social clubs or not? Do you, because you said earlier that they will come eventually in Malta.
But first, what I think is very important is that we get the organizations set, and we establish criteria. It's very clear. I would like to see if we make any mistakes, maybe our criteria are not relevant enough, maybe some are wrong, maybe we need to adjust a few. I have no problem with realizing that we're on a learning curve here. And I would like to start slowly, because we are on a learning curve. So
we are indeed, and so are doctors. Because apparently they don't even study the endocannabinoid system during the process of education. So there we are, there you have it. And actually there are some doctors who resist strongly the idea. So until and unless the doctors, the medical profession come on board more openly and legally, I think there will be further obstacles down the line. But tell us then, Mariella, what are the aims and goals of the association? What is the vision of your authority?
The vision is many layers. First of all, the vision is that we actually manage to create a safer mode of taking in cannabis. That is the vision, I want to. This is something I wrote on the top of my banner for the forum. I said I want to create an environment where these organizations can grow and society can feel safe. I don't just want the people who take cannabis to feel safe and to be safe. I want all the community to feel safe. I want them to understand what we're doing, and I want them not to be judgmental, because that's how we take away the stigma. That is the way that we will solve the problem of stigmatization, where people can talk about their use. And if people are feeling they want to get some support about their use, they want to change their use, they want to understand why they need to smoke so much, they want to talk about feeling bad all of a sudden, where before it didn't used to affect them. People can talk about it more openly. They are not afraid anymore. That would be so beautiful, that you don't feel you're going to be judged, arrested, looked at, looked down on. This is so important. And this is the vision that I am that I would really love to create, you know.
I think that's a really unique approach, you know. That's a great way to think about how you can help those people who've been affected by the drug war and not just the businesses trying to get in and make a profit.
Yes.
So that's a really great approach.
And I would also like to help the organizations.
Of course,
you know?
of course.
I would like them to do well, because if they don't do well, then I'm setting them up to make mistakes and to fail and to do things illegally. You know, us Maltese, we're so crafty. We're unbelievable. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I tell you.
You know, nobody though has ever died apparently from taking cannabis. So when we say addiction, and you, of course, are in a prime position to explain, is cannabis addiction as bad as alcoholism, for example? You know, some people in all walks of life, any age range, have tried at some point, whether at university or even now. I'm sure there's many people, millions and billions of them, who smoke. Nobody has ever died of it. We've got this big argument going on about the number of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who've died from opioids and painkillers, etc., etc. I saw a wonderful documentary the other day. Millions, but not one, as far as I know, has died from taking cannabis. I mean, it would be impossible, probably, as I understand it, and I'm not a scientist, but apparently it could very well be addictive. But then, so are cigarettes, so is alcohol. Are we all addicts then?
No, let me tell you, there is addiction, there is dependency, and there is use. Even that is different. So addiction, something is you are addicted to something when it is not allowing you to live your normal life. You are addicted to something when you no longer can live a normal life. You can't function at work properly, your relationships, your health, your mental state. You are just driven by the need of addiction. I want to make one thing very clear. My approach to addiction, dependency, use, whatever it is that it is so often, and this is research and even my personal experience, a consequence of other problems. The actual problem is not the addiction. The problem is, why does a person need to numb themselves? I call it numbing the pain. Full stop. And it is the work of a therapist, of a person who wants to help, of a friend, of anyone, to understand what that pain is. So that's addiction. And addiction of any kind, whether it's substances, whether it's work, whether it's sex, whether it's spending too much money, any addiction that is going to affect your everyday life, it's a problem. So that's the first thing. Dependency is more like, for example, a person can live a normal life, go to work, have good relationships. But then the dependency is that unless they don't take a few drags of a joint, for example, they won't be able to sleep. Or for example, on the weekend, their idea of relaxing is not going for a walk in the countryside. They need to take some cannabis. That's a bit of dependency.
Maybe do both.
You know? But people do this. You know what I mean?
Right, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, some people enjoy a good glass of red wine.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is it. This
you know,
is what I'm trying to say.
It's one thing enjoying a good glass of red wine, and it's another not being able to enjoy a meal unless you have wine. That is a dependency. You understand the difference? And then there's use, where people every now and then feel like using some cannabis or feel like, you know what I mean? So it's very different, very different. But I tell you one thing, that 10 years ago, whether someone's addicted, whether someone's dependent, or whether someone just happened to use, and if the police had to stop them, they would get arrested. Right. Irrelevant of where they're at, who they are, what they're doing. And I think that is very relevant in why it is very important to understand who are the people who take cannabis, who are the people who actually use cannabis. The majority are not addicted. The majority may be dependent or use, but this is why we are going to be conducting research. Our research is going to be based on age, not the names. We're not going to get the names of anyone. No names. Very important. But we're getting the age, frequency of use, type of THC they look for, type of cannabis. So we're going to be getting all this information. Social economic status, background, education, status, whether married, whether female, male. I mean, all this information is going to give us a very good indication of who our users are. I'll be able to answer that question better in a year's time.
Oh, I can't wait to hear you in a year's time.
One other thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned about health and ODs and overdoses, etc. This is why it's very important that we are going to be offering quality tested cannabis, because, for example, you can seriously end up very badly with synthetic cannabis. I have had clients who have become paranoid or have suffered from psychosis because they already had problems. They already were vulnerable, and the cannabis didn't help. So yes, we need to be aware that whenever you are taking any form of substance, you need to be aware of what you're doing, because you can get hurt.
Were they isolated cases though? Did you come across that kind of situation often?
No,
where cannabis didn't help?
No, but it is very concerning that a lot of people who suffer from, for example, from anxiety, really begin to enjoy cannabis. But if that anxiety is a particular type of anxiety, they should get advice. For example, if they go to an organization and they say, look, I suffer from anxiety, I want to train the staff to be able to tell them, look, don't take 20% THC.
Yeah.
Take 10% THC. Because otherwise it will be too much for you.
Sure. Yeah.
You will overthink, or you will, this is the difference, you see? This is
absolutely. It's education, it's training, and it's dosage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So important. So important.
I know that Malta hosted Plant Medicine Week last week, and I know you were instrumental in organizing that. So I just wanted to touch on, the success of that event and kind of what were the major topics that dominated the conversation at the event, since it was a global...
There were two conferences. That was the medical, and that was a conference on medical cannabis and also psychedelic medication.
Right.
That was completely based on a business model, profit model, money-making model. It was totally different from the conference I held, which was the non-profit model. So the recreational was a non-profit harm reduction model, and the medical was a model. Say no more.
Interesting.
You see, for me, it's very interesting that medical marijuana, because it's medical marijuana is passed, the laws are passed so much quicker because it's medical marijuana, but it's the same substance.
Very true.
The same substance.
Indeed, they're all running in parallel, these issues.
It's regulated because it has the title of medical marijuana. It needs to be regulated if it's recreational,
So what about foreign investors? Foreign investors, tell us a little bit, Mariella, about the incentives that you're offering as a country to foreign investors. What do they stand to gain? They're all looking now. They're all looking very closely at Malta.
I'm slowing them down.
So they're all...
The truth is that if there are foreign investors, but foreign investors can only have a non-profit organization hand in hand with a Maltese, or they have to have a Maltese residency, or else they have to have a business with a Maltese person.
Right. So that puts you at a bit of a disadvantage to Cyprus, actually. It's a different strategy. Well, because foreign investors are free to do business here if they want to. They don't need local intervention, of course, local involvement or contribution or participation. Actually, it's not necessary at all. It's inevitable because, of course, they'll need to rely on local service providers in some form or another. Not necessarily, though, an investor in the business. I mean, it can be 100% foreign. I mean,
there are foreign investors, but obviously you need our island is small, sure. And it would be, and obviously the foreign investors who have shown interest can just, I mean, they're big, very big from all around the world. But obviously we have to allow Maltese residents. So if somebody has a residency in Malta, they work in Malta, they have a residency in Malta, then they can have a non-profit organization. But a person who does not have a Maltese residency, then no, they're not going to be given priority.
Why would a big foreign investor come to Malta to set up a non-profit organization?
Because it probably is a beautiful stepping stone, no? You do know where we're positioned. We're positioned right at the bottom of Europe. I would imagine that the thing is, I would imagine that foreign investors understand that if they manage to grow enough cannabis, they could export. But our law does not allow export. So I had to inform foreign investors that if they're going to come to Malta, this is what they have. This is what is being offered. Because the law does not allow exportation.
Gosh. No. So I'm not sure what the incentives would be for a foreign investor. It's not clear in my mind yet. So they would be there for the ride and the experiments and the experience, but for very little money.
But there are a lot of. The thing is, I think that an investor, if he's capable, if he's strong enough, he would put his foot in an opportunity that can grow and grow and grow. You know, because this is the first stage. You understand? This is the first stage. Things are going to change in the next 10 years. Things will change. I mean, I am hoping that the approach towards cannabis is going to change. I think it is already changing, and I think that I think we're the first country of many that are going to take this approach.
Yeah, I mean, the research is all important. I think, though, that from what I've seen and based on my extensive discussions with various different potential investors, not just for Cyprus, but for other EU countries as well, everybody's in a hurry, even though it's a long-term business strategy. Everybody's in a hurry to make that fast buck. And I think without the R&D, which is what you're saying Malta will be focusing on, it's quite hard for anybody to make progress at the moment. So the R&D spend is a big one, I think, for any business, whether or not there's any return on investment and how long that takes. I think initially, it most certainly will be an R&D cost.
I have no doubt that the non-profit organizations are going to be doing very well. I have no doubt that they are going to be doing very well, that they are going to be very comfortable, and that when things begin to open more, they're going to be in place to grow, you know. I think that people who are entering into this project, and there are many foreigners and Maltese, but foreigners with Maltese, I think they have a vision that is, and most of them are quite young, younger than me, that's for sure. So they have a lot of energy, motivation, and they have a vision. And I think if they're smart, I think they'll do very well. I think that if they're smart, they'll do very well.
Okay, but if they can't export, Mariella, I'm missing something, I think, because if they can't export, so we've said already that there's the R&D element, there's the non-profit. Yes, they'll position themselves to take advantage of the inevitable growth in the cannabis sector across the board, whether that's recreational, CBD, medical cannabis, it's all in the throes of massive growth, whether it's regulated or not. So what would they be able to do in the future
Well,
with the cannabis
first of all,
they're growing?
It makes sense.
If they're not exporting,
It
where's the
makes
business plan?
sense. Yeah, it makes sense that there is no export because there isn't one country in Europe where it would be legal. So there definitely is not going to be any export. I have no doubt in my mind the USA does not need our cannabis. No doubt in my mind that Canada doesn't need our cannabis. The two medical establishments, medical cannabis establishments that there are in Malta do export because it is legal. So there is no way that there can be a law that allows us to export cannabis, not only because in Malta it's not legal to export, but because where are you going to export to? Europe is out. America
we are allowed
is out.
to do that. In Cyprus, we both pieces of legislation, hemp and medical cannabis, provide for exports.
Yes, medical we can export. Medical is allowed.
Yeah.
And hemp, I am going to work on, doing this furniture and but recreational cannabis, I mean, it would be illegal.
Maybe not recreational,
But medical is allowed, yes. Medical is allowed.
Medical and hemp, of course, recreational, we're still burdened, if I may use that term, by the UN Convention. So, of course, we're all trying to find a way, and that's exactly why I said at the outset that Malta are pioneering, because there is, it's taking off all across Europe. I mean, you've got Germany and Switzerland and all of the others coming on board with recreational. Honestly, in my 3 or so years of active participation in this sector, I have steered clear of recreational because I think it's quite far away for us, until and unless, of course, you do such a great job that suddenly in the next year, 22, 23, Europe comes along and says, right, all of EU member states now have to allow for recreational cannabis, which would be a dream come true, wouldn't it?
I really hope
but in terms of that's why I try to separate them in my mind, because I always talk about legal cannabis from the Cypriot point of view and perspective. I always mention legal cannabis, and right now recreational is not legal. So I understand that we're talking about
medical can be exported. It is exported, but we have two established. It's medical cannabis is obviously it's it has stricter criteria, but it can be exported. But I'm talking about recreational cannabis.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's illegal. We would be conducting illegal activities if we had to export.
Indeed,
no way
of course. No. I mean, that's clear. And even our medical cannabis law, the reason why it's up for amendment again is because we've included some provisions for the government to check, of course, what goes in, what goes out, and to monitor very closely what's going on. And that's for medical cannabis, because we're still under this UN convention. I've got a wonderful publication, by the way, about the UN Convention. I don't know if you've seen that, but we should send it to you if you haven't seen it already. It was distributed within the Global Go group just the other day. It makes for fascinating reading for recreational, I'm saying, and how the laws have been interpreted over the last few years by many, and why he thinks there's total misinterpretation surrounding the issue. So it's very interesting.
I mean, I was just reading it today, to be honest with you. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
In the 60s and 70s, this law
goes all the way back to the 60s and 70s. So what's the time frame then, Mariella? What's the how quickly are you going to finalize your master plan and get this out?
I can say what I'm doing in the next few months. Now I've given all the criteria, so I have the people who are setting up organizations doing their homework. I gave them homework.
I'm sure you did.
In May, I'm bringing down professional people to Malta. And they are going to be going around these or seeing how they're setting up, helping them out, giving them advice, saying where they failed, where they did well, what they need to do. I want them to be really advised well. I want to be supportive, not just regulatory. So we're going to be doing that too. And I'm going to see the outcome. I want feedback to see how much it works, to pass on the feedback to the rest on an international level. If necessary, listen, this works, this doesn't. Then I'm going to hold another forum, and I'm going to start training the staff that are going to be hiring. When things are in place, we need to see about the financials, because I don't want, I would like exchange of cannabis to be done without money. I would like it to be done in as at least using at least cash as possible. So all these details have to be sorted out. So in May, this is going to be happening. I am hoping that before the end of the year, we will start giving out the licenses, some licenses, or the people who are actually organized in place and all the criteria has been met. Hard work, hard work.
It is hard work, but you have a supportive government, you see, and I assume that they've placed a budget as well on this exercise. So when you have both the funds or access to funds if you need it, combined with governmental support, you can't wish for anything more, actually.
Yes, I have to say that, I mean, the government is really, and today I met my new minister, and honestly,
the Minister of Health. The Minister of Health.
No, he's not the Minister of Health. I am now, he's the Minister of Reform, the Minister of, so it's an amalgamation, a very big ministry. He's even responsible for the police, he's responsible for reform, very young, open-minded, really wants this to work. I explained to him how important it is that we do well, both for on a national level and on an international level. So we really
when you say that you're bringing people in, you said you're bringing some people in to help lay down the foundation. Where are they coming from?
Well, the first forum I got Steve Rose, who's a policymaker, as my first guest. The second group I'm going to bring from Barcelona. I'm going to, because in Barcelona they conduct so much good work, so much research. They really work hard, these professionals. I mean, I really, honestly, they are real people.
Barcelona.
And I know that they will be very helpful. They will be very helpful in guiding us and doing something that they themselves would love to do, but they cannot do it in such a way that the regulatory body is, we have one for the whole, all the organizations. I mean, yes, so this next group that's going to come down is from Barcelona, but yeah, I'll be going, you know, I mean, I've even spoken to some people from America, from the USA, who have a lot of experience too. So I'm very eager to meet some people from the USA. I'm very eager to meet some people from Canada too. These are all people with vast experiences. I've been in contact too with some lovely people from RAND, which is a international research organization. And they did a lot of work with Uruguay, which also legalized cannabis. But Uruguay, for example, dispense cannabis from pharmacies too, recreational and medical from pharmacies. So that's something I didn't want to do. I do not want them to be mixed up. They are two separate things.
So where will they, so recreational will be dispensed where?
There will be a place that is not promoting cannabis, just a simple place where they dispense the cannabis, not pharmacies. It's a place just to dispense cannabis. Before, and if that works well, eventually there will be social clubs. But first we need to see and ensure that the organizations are working well, that they're managing to have, for example, good quality cannabis. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. So first they do the work and then we do to phase two, everything in phases.
Sounds like you're assembling a good team and you've got a big goal ahead of you and a lot of work to do. Of course, if you would like to pick up a conversation regarding what's going on in the US, Global Go would love to help you out. But thank you, Mariella, for attending today and being our guest on this podcast. I definitely learned a lot about Malta. And this is just a very nice and engaging conversation. Thank you, Andrea, as well. Any last comments before we break?
Well, you're very welcome to visit. I would love
I will
you
come.
Oh, very welcome, Andrea. I think you're going to have to come
certainly.
before the end of this year. You're going to have
Mariella,
to come.
for sure, without a question of a doubt, I will be there before the end of the year.
Very welcome to visit. Honestly,
this is just the tip of the iceberg, as they say, and we've got so much to talk about. We could talk for much longer, and I think we've skimmed the surface, and we'll need to carry on talking. And for sure, as I've said to you already, I will be following very closely. So congratulations. It's really great that you've given us so much of your time as well. And I've learned also a great deal. It was a pleasure. Thank you.